Family betrayal hurts more when it comes from the ones you trusted the most. The ceramic mug shattered against my dining room wall, red wine exploding like blood across the cream wallpaper my grandmother had hung 40 years ago. For a split second, time stopped. The silence was deafening. Then, my son-in-law's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You don't tell me what to do in my own house, old woman." I'm Gloria Henderson, and I've lived 61 years on this earth. I've buried a husband, raised 2 children, and survived more heartbreak than most people see in a lifetime. But nothing prepared me for the monster sitting across my dinner table that night, calling me Mama G, with wine on his breath and rage in his eyes. You see, when your daughter brings home a man who seems too good to be true, your mother's instinct starts whispering warnings. When he starts controlling her every move, that whisper becomes a scream. And when he throws a mug at your head because you won't enable his drinking, you realize you're not dealing with a man at all. You're dealing with something much worse. But before I tell you how this devil in disguise finally got exactly what he deserved, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. I need to know how far this story reaches, because what happened to my family could happen to yours. The mug that nearly took my head off that night, it's sitting on my mantelpiece right now. Not as a reminder of fear, but as a trophy of survival. My daughter Tanya was 28 when she met Daryl Washington at a church barbecue. She'd just gotten out of a messy relationship with her children's father, and she was vulnerable, raw, looking for someone to make her feel whole again. Daryl was 35, smooth as silk, with a smile that could charm the paint off a fence. He ran a small contracting business, always dressed sharp, always had cash in his pocket. When he looked at Tanya, she lit up like Christmas morning. I'll be honest with you. At first, I liked him too. He'd show up at my house on Sundays with groceries I didn't ask for, calling me Ma and complimenting my cooking. He'd play with my grandchildren, little Maya and Darius, making them laugh until their bellies hurt. He seemed like the answer to my prayers for my daughter. But you know what they say about things that seem too good to be true? The changes started small. Tanya stopped wearing her favorite bright yellow dress, the one that made her skin glow. She said Daryl thought it was too attention-seeking. Then she stopped doing her hair in those beautiful braids she'd worn since high school. Daryl likes it straight, she'd say, running her fingers through chemically relaxed strands that looked nothing like my daughter. When we talk on the phone, I'd hear him in the background. "Who dat? What they want? Tell them you're busy." And Tanya would cut our conversation short, her voice getting smaller each time. The confident, outspoken girl I'd raised was disappearing piece by piece. I tried talking to her once, sitting in her kitchen while she made coffee with shaking hands. "Baby, are you happy?" I asked, watching her face carefully. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Mama. Daryl's just under a lot of pressure with work. You know how men get when they're stressed." But I knew my daughter. I'd raised her to speak her mind, to stand tall, to never let anyone dim her light. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the child I'd poured my heart into for 28 years. Daryl had rules. Tanya couldn't go out with her girlfriends without permission. She couldn't spend money without asking. She couldn't even answer her phone when I called if he was home. "He just wants us to have family time," she'd explain. But her eyes told a different story. The worst part? Watching my grandchildren walk on eggshells around the man they were supposed to call Daddy. Maya, who used to be a chatterbox, would go quiet when Daryl entered the room. 8-year-old Darius started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 4. I'd been a school principal for 30 years. I knew the signs of an abusive home. I'd seen it in my students, in their parents, in the way fear changes people from the inside out. But when it's your own family, when it's your baby girl, you tell yourself you're overreacting. You tell yourself it's not that bad. You tell yourself lies because the truth is too terrifying to face. But deep in my heart, I was documenting everything. Every bruise Tanya tried to cover with makeup, every time she canceled plans at the last minute, every phone call that ended abruptly when Daryl came home. I didn't know it then, but I was building a case, and that case would save my daughter's life. The first time I saw real fear in Tanya's eyes was at Maya's 9th birthday party. We were in my backyard, kids running around, adults laughing, the smell of barbecue filling the air. It should have been perfect. Tanya was helping me bring out the cake when her phone rang. The moment she saw Daryl's name, her whole body tensed. "Hey, baby," she answered, her voice artificially bright. "Yeah, I'm at Maya's party, remember?" I couldn't hear his words, but I could hear his tone. Sharp, demanding, angry. No, I didn't forget. I'll be home soon." Her hands were trembling as she held the phone. "Okay. Yes, I love you too." When she hung up, she was already grabbing her purse. "We have to go, Mama. Daryl needs me to pick up something for work." "But baby, we haven't even cut the cake yet. Maya's been looking forward to this all week." Tanya's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I know, but he's waiting." I watched my daughter gather her children, watched Maya's face crumble when she realized they were leaving, watched Darius clutch his mother's hand like he was afraid she might disappear. That night, I called Tanya 3 times. No answer. The next morning, she showed up at my door with a black eye she tried to hide behind sunglasses. "I walked into a cabinet door," she said before I could ask. "You know how clumsy I am." But I raised this girl. I knew every expression on her face, every tell when she was lying. And I knew that cabinet doors don't leave fingerprint bruises on your throat. "Tanya Marie Henderson," I said, using her full name like I did when she was little. "Look at me." She couldn't. She stared at her shoes, at the floor, anywhere but my eyes. "He's going to kill you," I whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. "Mama, don't be dramatic. It's not like that. He gets frustrated sometimes. His business is struggling, and I know I can be difficult." Difficult. My brilliant, beautiful daughter thought she was difficult for existing. That's when I knew I was losing her. Not to another man, not to distance or time or the natural way children grow up and away from their parents. I was losing her to something that would consume her completely if I didn't act. But I also knew that pushing too hard would drive her further into his arms. Abusers are experts at isolation. They make their victims believe that everyone else is the enemy, that only they truly understand and love them. So I waited. I watched. I documented. And I prayed that when the moment came, when Tanya finally saw the truth, it wouldn't be too late to save her. The dinner invitation came 3 weeks later. Daryl wanted to make peace with me. I should have known it was a trap. The invitation came on a Tuesday. Tanya's voice was different on the phone, lighter somehow, like she was reading from a script. "Mama, Daryl wants to have you over for dinner this Saturday. He says it's time we all got along better." Every instinct I had screamed danger, but I missed my daughter. I missed my grandchildren. And maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to see what was really happening in that house. "What time, baby?" 6 o'clock. "And Mama, Wear something nice. Daryl's making his famous pot roast." A famous pot roast. The man could barely make toast without burning it, but I kept that thought to myself. Saturday evening, I stood in front of my mirror, choosing my outfit like I was going into battle. I settled on my burgundy dress, the one that made me feel strong, and my grandmother's pearl earrings for luck. In my purse, I tucked my phone, set to record at the touch of a button. Call it paranoia, call it preparation. I call it survival. The house looked perfect from the outside. Daryl had always been good at maintaining appearances. Fresh paint, manicured lawn, the kind of home that made neighbors think, "What a lovely family." But I knew better. I'd learned that the prettiest houses sometimes hide the ugliest secrets. Tanya answered the door wearing a long-sleeved blouse, despite the June heat. Her smile was too bright, her laugh too quick. Behind her, I could hear Daryl's voice booming from the kitchen. "Mama G, get in here, woman. This food ain't gonna eat itself." The dining room table was set with Tanya's good china, the set she'd gotten for her wedding to the children's father. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It looked romantic, intimate. It looked like a trap. Maya and Darius hugged me tight, whispering in my ear about school and friends and everything they'd been saving up to tell their grandmother. But even they seemed different, quieter, more careful with their words. "Where's your daddy?" I asked Maya. She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me. "He's cooking. He's been cooking all day. He's really excited you're here, Grandma." But her eyes said something else entirely. Her eyes said, "Please don't make him angry." That's when I knew this dinner wasn't about making peace. It was about showing me who was in control. It was about putting me in my place once and for all. I just didn't know how far he was willing to go to do it. Daryl emerged from the kitchen carrying a platter of pot roast, his chest puffed out like a peacock showing off his feathers. He'd been drinking. I could smell it on him from across the room, that sweet, sour scent of wine mixed with something stronger. "Look what I made for my favorite mother-in-law," he announced, setting the platter down with more force than necessary. The plates rattled. "It smells wonderful," I lied, settling into my chair. The meat looked dry, the vegetables overcooked, but I wasn't here for the food. He poured wine for everyone, filling his own glass to the brim. When he got to me, I covered my glass with my hand. "Oh, come on, Ma G. Live a little. This is good stuff. Cost me $60 a bottle." "I'm fine with water, thank you." His smile tightened, but he moved on. For now. The first 20 minutes passed peacefully enough. Daryl told stories about his work, bragging about contracts and clients, his voice getting louder with each sip of wine. Tanya nodded along, agreeing with everything he said, her responses automatic. "Tell Grandma about your new job, baby." Daryl reaching over to squeeze Tanya's shoulder. His grip looked too tight. "It's just part-time at the medical office. Filing, answering phones, nothing special." "Nothing special?" Daryl's voice had an edge now. "My woman's working, bringing in money for the family. That's plenty special. Ain't that right, Ma G?" "Any honest work is good work," I replied carefully. "Exactly, honest work. Not like some people who think they're too good to get their hands dirty." I felt the first prickle of real tension. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nothing. Just saying some folks think they're better than others, think their education makes them special." He was talking about me, about my years as a principal, my college degree, the respect I'd earned in my community. He was trying to diminish me in front of my daughter and grandchildren. "Education is important," I said evenly. "It opens doors." "Does it?" He leaned back in his chair, wine sloshing in his glass. "Because seems to me all that education didn't help you keep your husband alive." The room went dead silent. Tanya's fork clattered to her plate. Maya and Darius stared at their food, afraid to look up. My husband had died of a heart attack 12 years ago. It was sudden, devastating, and completely out of anyone's control. But Daryl had just weaponized my grief, turned my loss into ammunition. "That was uncalled for," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Was it? I'm just saying, maybe all that book learning ain't worth much in the real world. Maybe what matters is taking care of your family while you got 'em." He was drunk and mean and looking for a fight, but I wouldn't give him one, not in front of the children. "You're right," I said quietly. "Family is what matters most." He seemed surprised by my response, like he had expected me to explode. When I didn't, he pushed harder. "Tanya, get me another bottle from the kitchen." "Baby, maybe you should slow down. We haven't even finished eating yet." His head snapped toward her so fast I thought he might get whiplash. "Did I ask for your opinion?" "No, but then get the bottle." Tanya's hand shook as she stood up. I watched my confident, intelligent daughter reduced to a servant in her own home, and something inside me cracked. "She's right," I said. "You've had enough to drink." Daryl's eyes locked onto mine. In them, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Not just anger, not just drunkenness. I saw a man who enjoyed causing pain, who fed off fear and control. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You've had enough to drink." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can come into my house and tell me what to do?" "I think I can speak up when I see someone I love being disrespected." "Someone you love?" He stood up slowly, swaying slightly. "Or someone you think you own?" The children were crying now, quiet tears streaming down their faces. Tanya was frozen by the kitchen door, caught between protecting her children and avoiding her husband's wrath. And I realized this had been his plan all along, to humiliate me, to show Tanya what happened to people who crossed him. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. What happened next unfolded in slow motion, like a car accident you see coming but can't stop. Daryl reached for the wine bottle in the center of the table. His movements were sloppy, aggressive. Wine sloshed over the rim of his glass as he poured, staining the white tablecloth red. I quietly moved the bottle away from him. "What did you just do?" His voice was low, dangerous. "I moved the bottle. You don't need any more." "Give it back." "No." That single word hung in the air like a challenge. Maya whimpered, and Darius reached for his sister's hand under the table. Tanya pressed herself against the kitchen door frame, her face pale as paper. "Give it back." "Daryl, please," Tanya whispered. "The children." "Shut up!" he roared, spinning toward her. "This is between me and your mother." He turned back to me, his face twisted with rage. "You think you run everything, don't you? Think you can waltz into my house and disrespect me in front of my family?" "This isn't about disrespect. This is about you being a bitter old woman who can't stand that your daughter chose me over you." The words hit like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from angry parents during my years as a principal. I learned to stay calm in the face of fury. "Sit down, Daryl. Let's finish dinner." "Don't tell me what to do." He grabbed his coffee mug, the heavy ceramic one Tanya had bought him for Father's Day. For a split second, I thought he was just going to drink from it. Then his arm drew back. "Daryl, no!" Tanya screamed.
The mug flew through the air, spinning end over end. I ducked instinctively, feeling the wind as it passed inches from my head. It exploded against the wall behind me, ceramic shards flying everywhere, wine spraying across my grandmother's wallpaper like blood spatter. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya was sobbing openly now. Darius had crawled under the table. Tanya stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, staring at the destruction. And Daryl? Daryl was breathing hard, his chest heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. But in his eyes, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Satisfaction. He'd enjoyed it, the violence, the fear, the power. He'd enjoyed watching his family cower, enjoyed seeing me duck for cover. "Get out," he said quietly. I stood up slowly, brushing ceramic dust off my dress. My hands were steady, my voice calm. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He laughed. "Yeah? What are you going to do about it, old woman? Call the police? Tell them I threw a mug? They'll laugh you out of the station." I looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, his arrogance, his absolute certainty that he was untouchable. Then I looked at my daughter, at my grandchildren, at the family he was destroying piece by piece. "We'll see." I gathered my purse with hands that refused to shake, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The children were still crying, soft, hiccuping sobs that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Tanya," I said quietly, "walk me to the car." "She's not going anywhere," Daryl snapped. But his voice had lost some of its edge. Reality was starting to seep through his drunken rage. "Yes, she is." I looked directly at my daughter. "Walk me to the car. Now." For a moment, I thought she might refuse. She glanced between Daryl and me, torn between fear and love, between the man who controlled her days and the woman who'd given her life. Then she moved toward me. "Tanya." Daryl's voice was a warning. She stopped, her whole body trembling. "It's okay, baby," I said softly. "Just walk me to the car. 5 minutes." Outside, the evening air felt cool against my flushed skin. Tanya wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warmth. "Mama, please don't call the police. He didn't mean it. He's been under so much stress with work, and he's been drinking more lately, but he's not usually like this." I turned to face her, this beautiful, broken woman who used to light up every room she entered. "Baby, look at me. Really look at me." She raised her eyes to mine, and I saw everything I needed to see. The fear, the shame, the desperate hope that somehow this could all be normal. "He threw a mug at my head, in front of your children. What happens next time when you're the one who says no to him?" "It won't happen again. He promised." "They always promise." I cupped her face in my hands, feeling the tears she was trying so hard not to shed. "Sweetheart, this is how it starts. First, it's a mug thrown at your mother. Then it's a hand across your face. Then it's worse." "You don't understand. He loves me. He takes care of us. Without him, I don't know how I'd manage with the kids and—" "You managed before him. You can manage after him." She pulled away from me, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. "Please, Mama, just give him another chance. For me, for the kids. They need a father." I wanted to shake her, to make her see what I saw. But I'd been in education long enough to know that you can't force someone to learn. They have to be ready to receive the lesson. I said, "I love you. No matter what happens, no matter what he tells you about me, remember that I love you." I got in my car and drove home through blurry vision, my hands finally starting to shake now that I was alone. The first thing I did when I walked through my front door was call 911. The second thing I did was start documenting everything I could remember, writing down every detail while it was still fresh in my mind, because I knew this was just the beginning.
Officer Martinez arrived at my house 45 minutes later, a young woman with kind eyes and a notepad that had seen better days. She listened as I recounted everything, taking pictures of the wine stains on my dress, the ceramic dust still clinging to my hair. "Ma'am, I need to ask you this directly. Do you want to press charges for assault?" "Yes, absolutely yes." She nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll need to get your daughter's statement, too, and the children, if they're willing to talk." My heart sank. "Officer, my daughter won't cooperate. She's terrified of him." We hear that a lot, but without her testimony, this becomes a lot harder to prosecute. An hour later, Officer Martinez called me back. Her voice was tired, frustrated. "Mrs. Henderson, I spoke with your daughter. She says it was an accident, says her husband was reaching for something and knocked the mug over by mistake." "That's a lie." "I know, but she's sticking to her story. The children were too scared to say much of anything. Without witnesses willing to testify, the DA probably won't pursue this." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "So he gets away with it?" "For now. But, Mrs. Henderson, keep documenting everything. Every incident, every bruise, every time she cancels plans or seems afraid. Build a paper trail. Because this won't be the last time." She was right. 3 days later, Tanya called me, her voice small and broken. "Mama, I'm sorry. I know you're angry with me, but I had to protect my family. If Daryl gets arrested, he could lose his business. We could lose the house. The kids could end up in foster care if—" "Baby, stop. Just stop." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her fear through the phone. "I love you, Tanya. That will never change." But I didn't stop documenting. I didn't stop watching. And I didn't stop preparing for the call I knew would come. The call that would change everything. It came at 2:17 in the morning on a Tuesday in September. The phone's shrill ring cut through my sleep like a knife. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Mercy General Hospital. Your daughter, Tanya Washington, has been admitted. She's asking for you." I was dressed and in my car within 10 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and fear, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. I found Tanya in room 314, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her left eye was swollen shut, purple and black like a rotten plum. Bandages covered her arms. A machine beeped steadily beside her bed, monitoring her heartbeat. "Oh, baby." The words came out as a whisper. She tried to smile, but her split lip made it look more like a grimace. "Hey, Mama." "What did he do to you?" "It was an accident. I fell down the stairs, hit my head on the—" "Tanya Marie, don't you dare lie to me. Not here, not now." Her good eye filled with tears. For a moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth. Then she looked away. "Where are Maya and Darius?" "They're with Mrs. Patterson next door. They're okay. They didn't see. They were asleep when it happened." A nurse came in, a middle-aged black woman with gentle hands and knowing eyes. She'd seen this before, too many times. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm Nurse Williams. Your daughter has a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and multiple contusions. She's lucky to be alive." Lucky. My daughter was lucky to survive her husband's fists? "The police want to speak with her, but she has the right to refuse."
I looked at Tanya, lying there broken and bruised, still protecting the man who'd put her in that hospital bed. I can't, Mama. You don't understand. If I press charges, if he goes to jail, what happens to us? I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have money saved up. The kids need stability. The kids need their mother alive. He said he was sorry. He cried, Mama, real tears. He said he'd never forgive himself, that he said the same thing after he threw that mug at me. She went quiet then, staring at the ceiling tiles like they held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. I stayed with her for 3 days, slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair, held her hand when the nightmares came, watched her flinch every time a man's voice echoed in the hallway. On the 3rd day, she finally spoke the words I'd been waiting to hear. Mama, I'm scared. I know, baby. I know. What if he kills me next time? I squeezed her hand. There won't be a next time. I promise you that. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a flicker of the strong woman that I'd raised, the woman who was ready to fight back.
Getting the restraining order was like trying to build a house with broken tools. The legal system moved slowly, requiring forms and documentation and court dates that stretched on for weeks. But I'd been preparing for this moment since the night of the mug. I had photographs, dates and times written in my careful handwriting, medical records from the hospital, phone records showing the pattern of Daryl's controlling behavior. Mrs. Henderson, the family court judge said, looking over her glasses at the stack of evidence I'd compiled, "This is very thorough documentation." "Thank you, Your Honor. I was a school principal for 30 years. I know how important records are." Tanya sat beside me, wearing long sleeves despite the October heat. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, but she was there. She was fighting. The judge granted a temporary restraining order. Daryl had to stay at least 500 feet away from Tanya, the children, and me. He couldn't contact any of us directly or through third parties. "What if he violates it?" Tanya asked as we left the courthouse. "Then he goes to jail, no questions asked." But I knew restraining orders were just pieces of paper. They couldn't stop a determined man with nothing left to lose. I moved Tanya and the children into my house. It was cramped, chaotic, and wonderful. Maya's laughter filled the rooms again. Darius stopped wetting the bed. Tanya started wearing colors. We changed the locks, installed security cameras. I taught both children how to call 911 and gave them a code word to use if they ever felt unsafe. "Grandma, why can't Daddy come home?" Maya asked one evening as I braided her hair. "Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, sweetheart, and when they do, other grown-ups have to make sure everyone stays safe." "Did Daddy make bad choices?" I met her eyes in the mirror. "Yes, baby, he did." Tanya started therapy twice a week. Dr. Patricia Coleman was a no-nonsense woman who specialized in domestic violence survivors. She helped Tanya understand that the abuse wasn't her fault, that love shouldn't hurt, that she deserved better. "It's going to take time," Dr. Coleman told me during one of our sessions. "The psychological damage runs deep, but she's strong, stronger than she knows." For 6 weeks, we lived in peace. Tanya got a full-time job at a medical practice. The children settled into new schools. We started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we were safe. Then Daryl started calling. Not Tanya directly, that would violate the restraining order. Instead, he called her workplace, her friends, even Maya's school, claiming to be concerned about his stepdaughter's welfare. "He's testing the boundaries,"
Dr. Coleman explained, seeing how far he can push before consequences kick in. I documented every call, every violation, every attempt to circumvent the court order, because I knew this was just the calm before the storm, and I was right.
The call came on a Thursday morning in December, 8 months after the restraining order. Tanya's voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Mama, you need to sit down." "What's wrong? Are the kids okay?" "The kids are fine. It's Daryl." My blood went cold. "Did he violate the order? Did he come near you?" "No, Mama. He's sick. Really sick." I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. "He has cancer. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank into my kitchen chair, staring out the window at the bare December trees. "How do you know this?" "His sister called me. She said he's been in the hospital for 2 weeks. The doctors, they're saying he has maybe 3 months. 3 months. The man who terrorized my family, who'd put my daughter in the hospital, who threw a mug at my head, was dying. And I didn't know how to feel about it. Tanya, baby, I know this is hard to hear, but he wants to see me, Mama. He wants to apologize. His sister says he's changed, that facing death has made him realize what he's done." "Absolutely not. You are not going anywhere near that man." "But what if he really is sorry? What if this is his chance to make things right before he dies?" I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of protecting my daughter from her own compassion. "Sweetheart, dying doesn't automatically make someone a good person. Cancer doesn't cure cruelty." "I know that. But what if I don't go and I regret it for the rest of my life? What if the kids ask me someday why I didn't let them say goodbye to their stepfather?" There it was, the guilt, the what ifs, the same emotional manipulation that had kept her trapped for years, now wrapped in the tragedy of terminal illness. "If you're determined to do this," I said carefully, "then I'm going with you." "Mama, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. If you're walking into that lion's den, you're not going alone." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Okay, but promise me you'll keep an open mind. People can change, especially when they're facing death." I promised, but in my heart, I knew better. Leopards don't change their spots just because they're dying. They just get better at hiding them. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what Daryl had been waiting for. One last chance to sink his claws into my daughter's heart. One last chance to destroy her from the inside out. Mercy Hospice Centers smelled like flowers trying to mask the scent of death. The hallways were painted in soft pastels, meant to be soothing, that they just made everything feel surreal, like we were walking through a dream. Daryl was in room 12, propped up in a hospital bed that made him look smaller than I remembered. The cancer had eaten away at him, leaving behind a skeleton wrapped in loose skin. His once thick hair was gone, his eyes sunken deep in his skull. When he saw Tanya, he started crying. Not the angry, frustrated tears I'd seen before. These were different, broken, ashamed. "Baby," he whispered, reaching out with a hand that shook like autumn leaves. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Tanya moved toward him like she was in a trance, taking his hand in both of hers. "Daryl." "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I needed you to know that I loved you. I still love you. I was so messed up inside."
He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse. Real pain that had nothing to do with the cancer eating him alive. "Ma G," he said, his voice barely audible. "I owe you the biggest apology of all. You were trying to protect your daughter, and I was a monster." I stood there watching this broken man who'd once thrown a mug at my head and felt something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the beginning of understanding. I've been going to counseling, even here. The chaplain, he's been helping me understand why I did the things I did. My father used to beat my mother. Beat me too. I swore I'd never be like him, but... He trailed off, tears streaming down his hollow cheeks. "That's not an excuse," he said quickly. "Nothing excuses what I did to you, to the kids. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how sick I was." Tanya was crying too, her hand still holding his. "I forgive you," she whispered. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. For me. So I can move on." We stayed for an hour. Daryl told us about his childhood, about the rage that had lived inside him for so long, about the fear that had driven him to control everything around him. He asked about Maya and Darius, tears flowing when Tanya showed him pictures on her phone. When we left, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Maybe people could change. Maybe facing death really did strip away all the lies we tell ourselves. Maybe I've been wrong about Daryl Washington. But as we walked to the car, something nagged at me. Something about the way he'd looked at Tanya when she wasn't watching. Something about the timing of his sister's call. Something that felt too convenient, too perfect, too much like the old Daryl playing one last game.
Daryl died on a Tuesday morning in February, 3 weeks longer than the doctors had predicted. Tanya got the call at work and came home with red eyes and a heavy heart. "He went peacefully," she said, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. His sister was with him. She said he kept asking for me at the end. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, baby." "Are you? Really?" The question caught me off guard. Was I sorry? This man had terrorized my family, put my daughter in the hospital, traumatized my grandchildren. But seeing him in that hospice bed, broken and repentant, had changed something in me. "Yes," I said, and meant it. "I'm sorry for the pain he carried. I'm sorry he never learned how to love without hurting. And I'm sorry you're grieving." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I want to handle the funeral arrangements." "Is that crazy?" "No, sweetheart. It's compassionate. It's who you are." The funeral was small. Daryl's sister, a few coworkers, some people from the hospice center. Tanya had chosen a simple casket, modest flowers, a brief service that focused on redemption and forgiveness. Maya and Darius sat between us in the front pew, confused but trying to be respectful. They'd visited Daryl twice in the hospice. Awkward encounters where he'd apologized for scaring them and told them he loved them. "He wasn't always bad," Maya had said afterwards. "He was just sick, right, Grandma?" "Yes, baby, he was sick." The pastor spoke about second chances and the power of forgiveness, about how even the most broken people could find grace in their final moments.
It was a beautiful service, full of hope and healing. But something still bothered me. Maybe it was the way Daryl's sister kept glancing at Tanya during the service. Maybe it was the fact that none of his old friends showed up. Maybe it was just my suspicious nature, honed by years of dealing with troubled students and their families. After the burial, Tanya decided to clean out the house she'd once shared with Daryl. His sister had signed it over to her, saying Daryl had wanted her to have it. "I'm going to sell it," Tanya said, as we walked through the rooms that held so many painful memories. "I'm going to start fresh somewhere new." We spent the afternoon packing his belongings, clothes for donation, papers for shredding, personal items for his sister. It was therapeutic, in a way, like closing a chapter on the darkest period of our lives. Then Tanya found the lockbox. It was hidden in the back of his closet, behind a stack of old tax returns. Heavy metal, secured with a combination lock. "Should we open it?" she asked, turning it over in her hands. Every instinct I had screamed yes, but I looked at my daughter, finally at peace with her past, and hesitated. Maybe some things are better left buried.
The lock clicked open on the third try. Inside the box were documents, photographs, and a truth that shattered everything we thought we knew about Daryl Washington. The first thing Tanya pulled out was a marriage certificate, not hers. This one was dated 3 years earlier, before she'd even met Daryl. The bride's name was Rochelle Jennings from Atlanta, Georgia. "I don't understand," Tanya whispered, her hands shaking as she stared at the official document. "This has to be a mistake." But there was more. Bank statements showing regular money transfers from Rochelle's account to Daryl's. Love letters written in a woman's handwriting, talking about their future together, about the house they were going to buy, about growing old together. Then came the photographs. Daryl and Rochelle at what looked like a wedding reception. Daryl and Rochelle on vacation. Daryl and Rochelle in bed together. Intimate photos that made my stomach turn. The dates on the photos overlapped with his relationship with Tanya. "He was married," Tanya said, her voice hollow. "The whole time we were together, he was married to someone else." I kept digging through the box, finding more evidence of his double life. Credit card statements showing purchases in Atlanta, hotel receipts, plane tickets, a whole other existence we'd never known about. At the bottom of the box was a letter, written in Daryl's handwriting. It was addressed to Rochelle, dated just 2 months before his death. "Dearest Rochelle," it began, "I know you're angry with me for disappearing, but I had to handle some business here. The woman I told you about, the one who's been helping me with my contracting work, she's gotten too attached. I'm working on extricating myself from the situation, but it's complicated because of her children. Once I'm free, I'll come home to you, and we can start the life we've always planned." Tanya dropped the letter like it was on fire. Business? I was business to him. The kids were complications. But there was more. Phone records showing calls to Rochelle right up until the week before his cancer diagnosis. Text messages talking about insurance money, about how his investment in Tanya would pay off when he inherited her house. The man we'd mourned, the man who'd seemed so genuinely repentant in that hospice bed, had been planning to abandon us the moment he got what he wanted. Even dying, he'd been playing games. Even at the end, he'd been a lie. I found Rochelle's phone number in the box and called her that same evening. When she answered, her voice was cautious, guarded. "Mrs. Jennings, my name is Gloria Henderson. I'm calling about Daryl Washington." Silence. Then, "How do you know that name?" "He was married to my daughter, or at least she thought he was." "That's impossible. Daryl is my husband. We've been married for 4 years."
Ma'am, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Daryl died 2 weeks ago. Cancer. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. No, that can't be right. He was supposed to come home. He said he was finishing up a job and then he was coming home. I spent the next hour on the phone with Rochella, both of us piecing together the truth. She'd been sending him money for months, thinking he was working on a big construction contract that would set them up for life. She'd been planning their future while he was living with my daughter. He told me he loved me. Right up until the end, he was telling me he loved me. He told my daughter the same thing. When I hung up, Tanya was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. The children were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their stepfather had been even worse than we'd imagined. "I feel so stupid," she said quietly. "You're not stupid. You're human. You love someone who didn't deserve it." "I forgave him, Mama. At his deathbed, I forgave him and he was lying to me, even then." I sat beside her, pulling her into my arms like I had when she was little and the world had hurt her. Forgiveness wasn't for him, baby. It was for you. And that's still true. It's been 3 years since we buried Daryl Washington. 3 years since we discovered the truth about the man who nearly destroyed our family. Tanya runs her own catering business now, something she'd always dreamed of doing. She's strong, confident, the woman I always knew she could be. She still has nightmares sometimes, still flinches when men raise their voices, but she's healing. Maya is 12 now, a bright, fierce girl who wants to be a lawyer when she grows up. "So I can help other mamas like Grandma helped us," she says. Darius is 10, gentle and kind, nothing like the man who tried to be his father. The mug that Daryl threw at me that night sits on my mantelpiece, glued back together with gold paint highlighting the cracks. It's a Japanese technique called kintsugi, where broken things are repaired with precious metals, making them more beautiful than they were before. That's what we are now. Broken, but repaired. Scarred, but stronger. I learned something important through all of this. Evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and pitchforks. Sometimes it comes with flowers and apologies. Sometimes it wears the mask of love, of need, of redemption. But real love doesn't hurt. Real love doesn't control. Real love doesn't throw mugs at your mother's head because she won't enable your drinking. If you're watching this and you see yourself in Tanya's story, please know that you deserve better. You deserve love that lifts you up, not love that tears you down. And if you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, don't give up on the people you love. Sometimes being strong means standing up to the people who hurt them, even when they can't stand up for themselves. Subscribe if this story touched your heart. Comment and tell me what part left you speechless. And remember, you're stronger than you know. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Thriller Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.